Good morning, Granada. Good to see you all here today, and I want to wish you all a happy Father's Day. Today, please join me in reading Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth give way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. The nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice. The earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us, and the God of Jacob is our fortress. Come, behold the works of the Lord, how he has brought desolations on the earth. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Thank you.
All right. So glad to have my sons do the reading here today. That was my son Isaac, and it's great to be a father when you have good boys and they're good men. And so it's a proud moment on Father's Day when you have a family like we have. So I'm so thankful for that. So thankful that I get to be here to share with you Psalm 46. Now, every time I get in my car and turn on the power, this sign pops up on the display right in front. It says, "Do not let the system distract you." Now, think about this. Every time you see that, it reminds me that something is here to distract me. Now, isn't it odd? The people who built that car designed the car to put a TV screen in front of you that has things on it. You know, it'll tell you what, maybe it's navigation or things like that, or your songs, your phone syncs to it, so you can pick your podcast, your music, and all of that's right there. It's there designed for a purpose. It's designed to do something for me. It's designed to help me, to make driving better or easier. But it feels the need to warn me, do not be distracted by the system. Because the reason I get in the car is to drive from point A to point B, right? And to do so without running over anyone or anything or hitting them. So that's the main goal. So if I'm staring at my screen, I don't know what's going on out there. And so it says, do not let the system distract you. And I like to use that as a little warning every time I get in there about life. Life is full of distractions. Things that might be good, they might not be, but they're a part of this atmosphere and world you're in, and they're constantly distracting you from what really you're here for. Now, when I started thinking about that, I had like all these things of like, oh, you know how we look at our phones an average of 200 times a day, like every 5 minutes. And all these statistics that are out there about how social media and how the news is out to get you and how the algorithm is designed to sabotage us and to put us on. Like I had a whole thing built on that and a ton of quotes and stuff. But I realized, you know what? We already know all that. I mean, how many times have we talked about that? Every college has a study about it. Congress has some big fake hoo-la-la about it. Everybody knows it. And in the end, what did we do? The exact same thing, right? No one deleted their stuff and threw their phones in the river and went on with life. We just continued moving. We just continued on. And everything around us is designed to distract us. But you know, that's not new. It doesn't have to do with phones and technology and news and media. In fact, listen to this quote from Marcus Aurelius, who was a Stoic philosopher, they call him now, but at the time, he really was just a general. He was a leader, he was a king, and he would write down notes of his leadership ideas and kind of form this thing. But even in the years between 120 and 180 AD. He says, don't waste the rest of your time here worrying about other people unless it affects the common good. It will keep you from doing anything useful. You'll be too preoccupied with what so-and-so is doing and why and what they're saying and what they're thinking and what they're up to. And all these things will throw you off and keep you from focusing on your own mind. Marcus Aurelius. I'm thinking, what was distracting him? He did not have a phone. He has an Instagram now, but he didn't then. Like, none of this stuff existed. And where was this stuff? There wasn't even a printing press. There wasn't even anything going on that he could be constantly. But he was. He says you've got to block out the noise and focus on what's important. It's a human problem from the beginning of time. Any generation, any historical period of time, everyone has the same thing, that things are around you to distract you from what's important. You see, it's not a modern society. It's not an American society. It's not a technology problem. It's a human problem. No matter what generation we are, we have to overcome this thing. And not to be distracted from God's glory and my purpose in that. And I think Psalm 46 is teaching us this through 3 stanzas. The psalm is divided into 3 parts, and at the end of each part is the word Selah. And Selah is a word, it's a musical term. It's a musical term that teaches us to rest. In fact, it was designed to, one, you would for sure rest the vocals. And you'll see that when Max leads worship here. There'll be a time when people stop singing and music continues. And there's a design purpose in that. They're designed to stop and listen for a minute. And that's a Selah. And so what would happen is in the psalm writing, they would have a stanza, and then the Selah means people stop singing, music keep playing. And then they would design that for that thing. And so Selah was closely associated to the word shalom, which is peace, rest, and to think through. And so this psalm is divided into 3 parts, each ending with rest. Now, I love how it begins with its bottom line straight up front. This is the main point. Verse 1, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. It comes with a bold statement, the thesis statement of what this is about. God is the strength in our trouble, and that he's present in that trouble. It goes on to describe even if the earth collapsed, if the mountains cast in the sea, really just using poetic language to say that everything around you is collapsing and failing and changing, and it seems like it's coming to an end. God is present, and he's a strength. This reminds me of an event in Jesus' life from Matthew chapter 14. And probably in your Bible, if it's broken into sections, it would say this section is called Peter Walks on the Water. And this is a very interesting story because what had happened in the context is Jesus had just finished long hours of ministry, feeding the 5,000. Lots of events had happened. And he put his disciples in a boat, sent them out into the water, and he said, I'm going to go be alone. And he goes into the wilderness, and he just goes to pray. He goes for Selah, and he rests and he prays. And while he's doing that, they're out in the middle of the night, and a storm comes, and the waves, and the wind, and the boat, and it's 3 a.m., it's 4 a.m., they haven't made it to the other side, and they can't seem to get anywhere, and they're afraid, and so Jesus leaves his peaceful place, walks out onto the water in the midst of the storm. So while they see him coming, they say, is that a ghost or Jesus? I don't know why they had those 2 options. You would think disciples would just assume this is Jesus. But they're like, is that a ghost or Jesus? And so while they're in the boat, they're looking, and Peter says this, Jesus, if that's you, call me to come out there. Now, isn't that a weird request? Peter is bold. If that was me, I would look out and I would say, Jesus, if that's you, stop the storm. Or, Jesus, if that's you, get in the boat and save us. I would never say, Jesus, if that's you, I want to come out on the water too. What a ridiculous request. What a request, though, that's full of faith, full of boldness, full of action. He says, if it's you, call me out. And so in verse 29, Jesus says, come. So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. Verse 30, but when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he said, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. I said, you of little faith, why did you doubt? I wonder when Peter looks back at that story, is he like, I'm the only person who got to walk on the water? Or is he like, I'm the guy who sank when I got out onto the water? Because both were true. He had faith, he was bold, he believed in what God called, and he stepped out of the boat and he walked on water. But notice that even though he was believing in God and doing what God called him to do, he got in the midst of it and he took his eyes off of Jesus and he started to look around at all the problems around him. The wind, the waves. He started to realize, what am I doing on the water? People don't walk on water. This isn't where I'm supposed to be. This isn't what I'm going to do. It's not possible. And he doubts and sinks. I think that's very descriptive of our lives many times. You have a faith in God. You believe in God. You set out following God. And then when in the midst of it, you see everything around you, and it gets chaotic, and it gets anxious, and it gets busy, and it's too big, and I think I'm going to fail, and you doubt, and you sink. Do not let the system distract you. You see, the psalm isn't designed to show us the distractions, but to bring us constantly to the source of strength. It begins with, God is our refuge and our strength. He is our present help in trouble. And the Psalms are very poetic in their expression. They would use images like mountains because they represent power and strength and protection. Because mountains would be natural barriers. Some people would live on that side of the mountain, and then you would never cross and see them because they provided that barrier. And to go over an obstacle like a mountain is huge and tiring. And so when the Bible talks of mountains, it's strength. And so for a mountain to be cast in the sea, it's impossible, right? It's beyond. And the oceans would always be described as chaotic and angry and vast and huge and just more than you could understand. They didn't know what's on the other side of the ocean. They didn't know if you go out there, you might not make it back. You could be isolated. It could be dark. There's always a storm coming in an ocean. And so oceans are always chaos. But then rivers and streams. You might remember when we studied Psalm 23. A psalm most everyone knows by heart. It says, it leads me beside still waters. Rivers and streams represent peacefulness, life-giving, tranquility, protection, rest, to be by the river, to be at the stream. And so this second stanza begins, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God. Holy habitation or a sanctuary of the Most High. When I picture that stream, I picture a river in the desert. Next week, we get to go hiking with my family in the Grand Canyon. And there's a place called the Ribbon Falls. And the Ribbon Falls, as you can see in the photo here, everything around it is dark and brown and dead and desert. And just feels hot and dirty. But wherever that stream touches, it's green. It's life. It feels cool and refreshing. You just want to be in it. You want to touch it. You want to get relief from the heat and the dryness, so you go to the life. This is the stream of God's life working in you. Even though your world might be a desert, it might be rocks, it might feel hot and against you, in the midst of that, it says there's a stream from the city of God. You see, this room is called a sanctuary. It's It's called a sanctuary because it's a safe place. It's where we know outside is chaos and things are happening, and we brought them in with us. But now what we've done is we've sat to be quiet for a moment, to listen for a moment, to worship for a moment, to take our minds off of the distractions going around us and to focus them on Christ and to see that we have a refuge in God, that we have a strength. And so each week we invite you, come to the sanctuary. Come and find that stream of life. Come and be refreshed by God. But you also must find sanctuaries and streams of life in your home. Because a Sunday to Sunday to Sunday isn't enough. Things happen Monday through Saturday, don't they? And you need to find a place in your home where you can make things quiet, where you can turn off the noise, where you can stop your mind and say, God, what are you doing here? Where you can open up his word, or you can turn on his music and you can pray and listen. You might need sanctuaries where you work or in your car. But we need these moments. Here we provide them on Sundays, but in our discipleship material, we learn how to do things like Sabbath, rest, or solitude to get away from things, or prayer, which helps calm our soul and reflect us to God. These are habits and needs that we must build because life is difficult. It's a desert. It seems it's against us to destroy us and to take us out, but these streams from God flow. Verse 5, God's in the midst of her, she shall not be moved. God will help her when the morning dawns. Nations could rage, kingdoms could totter, but his voice melts the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Selah. I want to call your attention to that phrase, God of Jacob, as a name for God. That's interesting to think about. Why choose that? I mean, Abraham's the father of the covenant. Why not say God of Abraham is our? Or even Isaac. Isaac was Jacob's dad, so that's one up, right? The God of Isaac. Why does it say God of Jacob? Well, the Bible's always very intentional, and people always had thoughtful reasons for that. It wasn't too long ago we did a whole series on the life of Jacob. And if you remember back to that or from reading, you realize that Jacob's life was not one of great character. Jacob was known as a manipulator, a trickster, someone who would betray people or do things to his own family to get ahead. He betrayed his brother. He had all kinds of schemes. All these schemes were trying to do what he believed God wanted for him and God said he would do, but instead of letting God do it, he used his own ways. So he had a lot of difficulty. Always family drama for Jacob. And so by using this God of Jacob, it teaches us that God's grace is towards imperfect people, sinful people like us. You don't have to be perfect to be able to say, God is my refuge and strength in my time of trouble. Jacob wasn't. And the God of Jacob preserved him. Also, it reminds us that God has the power to transform lives. Jacob began the name Jacob and had this history of conflict and manipulation. But Jacob's name was changed to Israel by the end. And he was the river that divided into 12 streams that became the tribes. God had changed his name and who he was. Interesting, Jacob, who was not a good father, was a much different man as a grandfather. And he was able to, in his older years, look back on the mistakes of his life and able to see the things and to be different. Finally, the name God of Jacob reminds us that God's commitment is to his promises. God will do what he sets out to do. His glory is greater than our promises. He will do. He will be exalted. His purpose and his promise in your life is bigger than the circumstances and the things that seem to set against you. Now, another great example that we can see from this psalm is the author of the psalm. Now, some Bibles may have it printed in the title and others may not, but it says to the choir master or the sons of Korah. The sons of Korah is attributed to writing this. Now, Korah, you have to go back into Numbers in the early years of Israel leaving out of Egypt. And it was when Moses and Aaron were the leaders of the Israelites, and they were journeying through the wilderness in all of their time. And Korah, he was a Levite, so he had some responsibility and some power, but he wasn't Moses and Aaron. And one day he comes to them and he says, look, all of us are God's people. And we're all just as good as you, Moses and Aaron. Why do you have all the power and authority? Why don't you share that with some of us? And by us, I mean me. Right? And so he was bringing this rebellion with this group of men saying, we should be in charge. And so Moses did what Moses does. He says, well, let's ask God. Right? And so they go, and God answers. He opens up the earth, swallows up Korah and all the people who were in rebellion, and they're destroyed. Pretty tragic. Now that's Numbers 16. But in the book of Numbers chapter 26, it says, but the sons of Korah were not swallowed up. And so these sons of Korah, this generation, were the worship leaders in the temple from that time on. And as we think of how that connects here, is to realize that God breaks generational curses. These young men watched their father rebel against God, be judged by God, and be destroyed, and yet they didn't follow that path. You see, having an absent or a bad father or a neglectful or an abusive father does not mean that you must follow that path of destruction. God breaks generational curses. He redeems even out of the darkest. And so this Korah, who had been judged by God for his rebellion, his sons did not carry that judgment. And that is the mercy of God that they continued there. And so generation after generation, they are attributed to writing 11 of the Psalms, the sons of Korah. And so from these 11 Psalms, this one comes forth. And I think that's important to highlight as we look at Father's Day, because fathers make a huge impression on our spiritual journey. And for those who you look at your relationship and you see maybe darkness or pain or loss or emptiness from your father, I want you to realize that God the Father redeems you in spite of that. That you do not live in a curse or in a pain from that forever, that you are free. And then also to fathers, as we think of this, I think a dad, even a good dad or a great dad, when we progress in our life, we look back and we think, well, I could have done more of this, or I should have done this, or I messed up here. We're always looking back and seeing. But I think the Bible is teaching us and showing us constantly that rest in what God does in your children. That you can't form their future for them, no matter how great or not great you are. God is the one who works on the hearts of people. And so just like Korah was an example of what not to do, his sons carried on in what to do. Now, in 1989, Billy Joel was sitting in his studio. He was at the age of 40. As a 40-year-old, he was sitting there and he was hanging out actually with John Lennon's son, Sean Lennon. Sean Lennon was like a 21-year-old young man at the time, and he was complaining about how, man, growing up in the 80s is so hard, that Billy Joel had it easy because he grew up in the 50s when everything was idyllic and everything was perfect and everyone had it great. So Billy Joel tells him, starts listing off all the things and troubles of his life and what it was like. So later he started to think about that, and he wrote it down. Harry Truman, Doris Day, Red China, Johnny Ray, South Pacific, Walter Winchell, Joe DiMaggio, Joe McCarthy, Richard Nixon, Studebaker Television, North Korea, South Korea, Marilyn Monroe, Rosenberg's H-Bomb, Sugar Ray, Pumanjan, Brando, The King and I, and The Catcher in the Rye, Eisenhower vaccine, England's got a new queen, Marciano Liberace, Santiago, goodbye, We didn't start the fire. How many of you know this song? It always burns since the world was turning. Anybody from the 90s? Hands. Who? Man, there was a generational guy. Okay, good. We got some from the 90s. How many of you remember you listened to that song on the radio, We Didn't Start the Fire? Great tune as it's going along. And you didn't really know the words, so you would just kind of go, da-da-da, da-da-da. And then when we get to the last line, you go, trouble in the Suez, we didn't start. You just knew to yell the last one, and then you'd go after it again. But he wrote this whole song really just to articulate, look, all those events happened in his lifetime. From 49 to 89 when he was 40 years old. And to him, there was just plenty of chaos. Now, in 2023, Fall Out Boy did a remake from Billy Joel's Permission of the same thing. And so if you're millennials, Gen A, Gen Z, and you're like, I don't know what those things are about, do the Fall Out Boy version, and then you could hear words like Pokemon and things like that, and Robert Downey Jr.'s in there, and all these Twilights, and all that stuff from the next generation. That's all in there, and they describe the political turmoil, the pop culture, and everything that ends with, we didn't start the fire. It was always burning since the world was turning. And the message of those songs is simply, look, it's not getting worse. It's always been worse. Right? Every generation thinks, oh, we have it harder, we have it worse. But everyone before it thought they had it worse too. But it's just, the world is sinful. Life is difficult. But God is our refuge and strength and very present help in trouble. So whether you were a disciple wondering if this is the end of the world, or if you're a second century Stoic philosopher saying don't be distracted, or you're all the way back in the BC era of stuff, or whether you're here worried about your Instagram and the algorithm and what it's doing to us, it's the same. God is our refuge and strength. I'll conclude with the final stanza here. It ends here. Verse 10, be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. That's the message. It says, I'll be exalted among the nations. I'll be exalted in the earth. God says, I'm not worried. This is all, I know what's going on. I'm above all this. And I think we can accept God's sovereignty in global issues. Maybe you can assign it in, geopolitical conflicts and the history and things. But are you able to assign God's sovereignty to your personal life and what's going on with you? Can you say, God's in control? This isn't what I planned. This isn't what I thought was going to happen. But God is my refuge and strength and a very present help in my trouble. It's when we could do that. The verse 11 says, the Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. And it ends with the word, Selah, rest. And so, as our musicians come up to sing, I just want to invite you to quietly rest and pray while they prepare.